I love it. All right. Well, let's give a warm welcome to Benjamin Gratto, an accomplished safety and risk professional holding a certificate, a CHMM, and a CPPS. Benjamin has built his career at the intersection of process safety, hazardous material management, and operational risk, helping organizations navigate complex, high hazard environments with discipline, clarity, and accountability. Whether you're responsible for PSM, chemical safety, enterprise risk, today's conversation should deliver some real world lessons, hard-earned insights, and a forward-looking perspective from someone who has lived the work, not just studied it. Benjamin, welcome to the Safety Nights podcast.
Well, thank you very much.
Safety is one of those professions that it's interesting how people end up in safety. Was this a planned career for you, or did you sort of just find your way here through the mysteries of life?
Probably the latter. I never considered myself being a safety professional, had no idea what EHS even was. And for me, it really began, during my time in the Marines, right? I was an infantryman from 2004 to 2012. I, just being around, that camaraderie and brotherhood you build in the military, and you're always protecting the guy on your right. You're doing safety, right? You're doing safety related things. I guess you don't realize you're doing it. After I got out, I started working, I went back home like many young men do, started working in the healthcare field
Okay.
as a carpenter
Wow.
for a hospital. A safety role opened up and they said, be good at it. We'd like go give it a shot. And so that's how I kind of stepped into my role in safety. And I think just because of my military background and things like that, it lended itself well to standardization, discipline, follow through, those types of things that you learn. And then just the more I learned about it, the more interesting it got, and learning about the different pathways you can take. I mean, EHS is a big industry, right? There's a lot of niches over time, just finding what my niche was, and it happened to be hazardous materials.
Okay. All right. I like it. So from that first kind of foray into safety, did you have anyone kind of mentor you, guide you, direct you a little bit in that first role in particular, or maybe a subsequent role?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it wasn't so much as like somebody more experienced. It was more like your peer group, right?
Okay.
You always had almost like the safety nights group, right? And other groups that that you reach out to when you need help figuring something out, right? So yeah, a little, I guess, mentorship, but just resource.
Oh, that brings me to a good point. So, thinking about somebody that maybe they're interested in safety, or maybe they're in a new role. I mean, there's probably a nugget there you've already mentioned, is obviously community is kind of a huge aspect. And it's one thing I love about safety. We love, obviously, at Safety Nights as well, is just everyone shares info. A lot of industries are kind of competitive and they safeguard the secrets of the business. Safety, like, man, you can go up to almost anybody most of the time. There are exceptions, and they will tell you how they're doing it or recommend or the latest trend. And so it sounds like you got plugged in, by necessity or choice early on, which is probably a huge help for you. But any tips you have for anybody that's in a new role getting into safety?
Yeah. I tell people, develop your soft skills, be
Okay.
hugely customer service, right? I believe I've had the most success in my career building relationships with people, getting to know what their precipitating factors are. People come to work, draw from their experience. So I really encourage new safety folks to really take the time. You can open an OSHA regulation book or go online now and you can look up regs, and it's great to be able to recite an encyclopedia,
Right.
but that doesn't make you a good safety professional, right? At least in my opinion. You have to bring those soft skills with you.
So you'd attribute a lot of your success to kind of getting out in the field, getting an understanding from the business, maybe the people that are actually in the work day to day. And it sounds like you kind of came from the work initially too. So that might have gave you a little bit of a competitive advantage, understanding there's a job to get done here and safety's got to be a component of it. So no, that's huge. That's helpful. Awesome. Well, is there anything that you believe that you think is a bit contrarian to the industry? Like, is there any recommendations that you have that you find are unique in your practice or your philosophy around safety?
I mean, I don't know if I would call it unique. I mean, I think we're all out there as EHS professionals trying to do, we're trying to do a job, we're trying to do a mission. I think at the end of the day, we just want people go home safe, not be exposed to anything, not get hurt on the job. That role is expanding as well into product compliance, right? So a lot of businesses are leaning on us now to produce or to at least have input into product manufacturing that's going to produce these products that are also now environmentally friendly.
Yes.
And that's kind of a niche role that a lot of us never really got experience in.
Oh, that's huge. Well, and you are unique to some of the guests we've had on the show. And I want to dig in just a little bit to the hazardous chemical world. And so, kind of, what does a day in the life look like for you? And maybe now, since obviously you're a little higher up in the org chart, somebody at a divisional level or a site level, what does that hazardous chemical compliance look like? What are maybe some of the pitfalls that companies can fall into? It could be, labeling or the inventory or compliance, or maybe there's just proper use or application. But anything from that world that's unique, tips or guides when it comes to hazardous chemical management?
My biggest, I think, at every organization I've worked at, I think my biggest, or at least the common thread,
Yeah.
is new inventory, right?
Okay.
All right. So you're working, doesn't matter if you're at a healthcare, manufacturing, wherever it is you're working. The maintenance guy runs down the road to the hardware store and buys something and brings it into the factory. Or the engineer is trying to get, this done for the customer and he orders 3 new chemicals. For EHS professionals managing a hazardous chemical program and, everything that comes along with that, the training, the SDS management, the PPE selection, right? You know, and then when you're trying to manage all of that for your existing inventory, and then you constantly have new chemicals being brought into the facility, and no way to trace that. That is probably the biggest pitfall that I've seen. Just because it's new work, right? Selecting PPE, for instance, is not as simple as, oh, we'll just go down and buy a box of nitrile gloves and it's going to be fine, right? Nitrile doesn't protect you from everything, regardless of what, the operations manager says. There's different materials out there for a reason, right? So yeah, think about all of those, think about all the task loading that happens, right? For bringing in one new chemical, you'll spend a few hours, right? Looking at it, assessing it. Do you have the right fire protection for that chemical? Do you have the right disposal needs for that chemical? Does the people using the chemical have the right, safety equipment in place to be able to use it safely? I mean, you'll spend a few hours just on a single chemical, let alone if you've got, even just, say a half dozen chemicals every year new to your facility. That's a lot of hours.
There's a lot of hours. And so when you're thinking about a large organization that has a lot of sites, how are you today kind of managing avoiding someone maybe going to the parts store, at least notifying somebody, when they're bringing in a new, because I imagine that communication element is a huge challenge, a huge part of that challenge to even know that a new chemical is on site, because they're just looking to get the job done and buying the chemical. And they're probably not thinking about the compliance and the SDS and all the factors that go into it. So,
Well, for me, I think, in the last 5 years, I think I've I've gone more towards the technology route,
okay.
right? In the industry, you'd be considered lucky, I think, and at least in my experience, in the industries I've worked for one organization where we actually had more than one EHS person,
Okay.
and so I had a team of EHS people that we all kind of towed the rope together. 9 times out of 10, though, it's one manager,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
run guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And um, so I think for me, leveraging technology and software, and then sort of like a subset of that is like, if you're going to go after a piece of software technology to kind of like make your life a little bit easier, really focus on those. What are the communication capabilities?
Mm,
It's not just about having face-to-face conversations. Those are important, but setting up those automated workflows, stop gates along the way, building in those automated things. I think that's really saved me a lot of time. And for those of us that are working almost single-handedly,
right.
then, it takes a lot of stress off of you, providing that your workflow is set up properly and you can trust it.
That's huge. Yeah, which is a battle, I'm sure, in and of itself to get the right technology in place and then to get it deployed in a way that is functional. I've been on the tech side a long time, so I could nerd out with you, I'm sure, all around that. I would love to know, switching gears a little bit here, was there a time, and we don't have to mention any particulars, but I'd love to know a, a transformative incident, event, something that happened, or maybe that was prevented that you really to maybe change the way you looked at safety, or you saw, and I've had a few of these myself that were like making you realize the importance of safety beyond just the compliance, beyond just the regulation, like the human element of safety and what we do and what happens when things inevitably go awry and the impact that can have.
I will never forget my second day on the job,
Second day.
second day in the hospital. And I told you that was my very first safety role earlier. And so, second day on the job, I get called down to a department, and there's a gentleman standing there, and he is upset. And I walked in, and I'm thinking, okay, well, of course I'm the safety guy, right? Like, I'm a little embarrassed to almost tell you this, but I'll finish my story for you.
Like it.
So, fresh out of the Marines, safety guy, right? Like, I'm gonna solve this problem. I'll tell you, I went in, and this guy's upset. He's yelling. He's treating the staff poorly, right?
Mm.
And of course, Mr. Bravado, right? I come walking in, and I'm standing toe to toe with this guy, and we're arguing, and I realized I'm going about this all completely wrong. It's the moment that is the situation. And 20 years later, I just remember, right, that this was the moment when I realized that precipitating factors
Right.
and building those relationships and really getting to know people is going to be so important to my success. It turns out all this gentleman wanted, just to make a long story short, is he wanted to be able to be with his wife while she had a procedure. That's all he wanted. And when I realized that, we quickly came up with a solution that would work for both people. He just couldn't be in the direct room with her during the procedure
Right.
due to whatever was going on. But we had in that particular suite there were camera monitors and cameras available to where he could see her, he could see everything, he could feel close to her, and that was enough. So we brought him in a chair, sat him in front of those camera monitors. He was happy, the staff was happy, everything went on about. But I remember standing there in the lobby of that department thinking, I what is going on here? But then you just have that light bulb moment, right? The light bulb came on. Luckily the light bulb came on, and I thought, okay, this is not at all what's supposed to be happening, right?
That's huge. So listen for we got two ears and one mouth for a reason. It sounds like there. I've heard
I
this
use that saying
theme.
all the time.
Yep.
That is
Yep.
my favorite saying.
Yep. No, that's it. And it's funny in safety because I do feel like we get the impression when you go on the plant or you're out in the field, a lot of these guys, you're an authority figure. You're like the police. There's a negative connotation around safety. And that is something that is hard to have a good safety culture and to also have a negative perception around the people that are there tasked to do the job for, keeping people safe. So it's a hard balance, but everyone I've seen that seems to have a really good safety practice, it does an excellent job of listening first and then, providing some insight or some guidance because they have a job to do. And I wonder if you ever run into experiences, and I get this a lot, where there's a little bit of a counterforce where, the business is a business and there are units of production. There's measurements that are very important to the business to hit those targets. And sometimes that can be a little bit, that speed or the perception of need to be fast can sometimes be a little antithetical to good safety practices because sometimes we get running and gunning and maybe forget the fundamentals. Have you ever had any instances like that? How do you manage production efficiency and also safety in the same umbrella?
Well, I've had pretty good luck, being when I switched over to from healthcare to a manufacturing industry, that's when in healthcare, you don't have a lot of, yeah, sometimes there's speed, but safety is inherently integrated, right? And I didn't notice a lot of that in the manufacturing industry. So, because like you said, right, you get running and gunning, there's product that has to go out the door, sales numbers have to be met by the end of the month or et cetera. But I've had very good success going out and again, build those relationships with the team leads, the plant managers, all of that, and then integrating safety into things like work instructions.
Mm,
rather than having safety be a separate add-on task that they then that's how they view it, right? They're like, well, I got to do all this, but oh, by the way, I got to do all this other safety stuff. If you make it part of their daily process and integrate it, they're more likely to do it. I mean, do we still have issues? You're always going to have issues, right? It's a behavior type thing. But I've had pretty good success integrating it in with things that they're already doing.
that's awesome. So how do you come to that point? I mean, just getting tactical and thinking about this because this is a trend I've heard, but thinking about how to implement it, do you have to understand the process? Is there a process you're thinking about like a production process or a specific, workflow in on the plant floor, and then you're doing some JSAs, doing a safety analysis, doing a risk assessment, you're doing some sort of performative action to identify maybe the unsafe conditions, and then diagnosing and implementing some sort of strategy to correct that action during the process, or what does that look like?
So, I mean, it looks like, yes, you're going to, of course, you're going to assess, you got to know what problem it is you're solving, and then you take out, I cannot remember the last time I did a standalone JSA. I'd
Really?
rather,
Okay, that's
well,
interesting.
I would rather take a work instruction and build in the safety steps directly into it, right?
Interesting.
So they're reading a single document, and if step 3 says put on gloves, they put on gloves, right?
Yep, yep.
Then so I look at it that way. During that whole process, I talk to the people. I talk to the guy that's going to be or the woman that's going to be standing there at the workbench doing the work. Does this make sense to you? I ask questions, right? Does it do you feel like you're going to be able to still produce the numbers, if especially if they're big into like the lean Six Sigma,
Yeah,
tech times and all that stuff, right? It's like, so talking to the people, building those relationships, getting their input, right? Because I can build an entire safety program in my office in a silo, right?
right,
And then
right.
I can go take it out on the floor and say, "Thou shall follow this program." It's probably going to end up in the circular file bin,
Yep.
right?
Oh, exactly. I go on sites all the time and you see the big catalog, especially the ones that are stuck, unfortunately, in the paper world, and they have a big SMS folder somewhere and it's pretty dusty. And I don't know the last time somebody opened it, and so yeah, I like this philosophy. When you're thinking about you mentioned technology earlier. And so I'm guessing that thought process carries into tool selection, but the implementation, the rollout of the technology itself. Are you big on having tech in the hands of the frontline or the plant supervisors? I mean, how does that kind of push into the organization itself beyond safety, if it does at all?
Oh, it does. I think it absolutely does. Anytime I can implement a piece of technology, it doesn't have to necessarily be high tech. Low tech things work too. Anytime I can eliminate using technology, I will very much be in favor of that. So what I mean is, don't just throw a machine guard on a machine and say, "Hey, we're guarded, we're fine." But throw in an interlocked machine guard. Throw in a magnet, a sensor, something with it,
Right.
because if that machine guard gets moved out of the way, the machine shuts off, right?
Huge.
I mean, does that work for every single piece of manufacturing equipment out there? No, but again, there's ways to integrate that technology. Things like, I know at one company I worked for, they were really big on the impact driver, right? And these impact
Mhm.
drivers had to have so many foot-pounds of torque, and they were heavy. And we were constantly having to lift them up and like kind of manually jockey them in place to use the tool. Well, we went through the entire factory and we put them all up on arms. So
Oh my God.
now, the workers aren't, they're not lifting this big heavy impact driver, right? It's the
Multiple
weight's
times a
being
day,
taken
potentially.
multiple times a
Yeah.
day, right? Plus it's on a retractor, so
Mhm.
they can just pull it down, do their work. And then we also put manual stops. So when these things are swinging back and forth, they can't potentially come around and hit somebody or hit product.
Right. That's amazing. And that was just something that you identified because you were out on the floor doing the work and you were looking at the problem area.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, let me ask you a question because this segue is really good. I love the safety world. The issue I find with a lot of people, they'll have some good ideas, but safety, as much as it is important, and it depends on the org, not throwing shade. Depends on the org, but a lot of times there's a big talk track around how important safety is. But when it comes to actually getting funding or getting approval or making any significant changes, seems to be a lot of resistance, or they're very slow to want to invest or time or money into big changes and corrective procedures. So do you have any tips, guidance on that process for people?
You gotta know how to talk their language.
Yeah.
When I first got out of the military and I had all that, I'd earned my Montgomery GI Bill and post
Mm.
9/11, all that stuff. I did not go after an EHS degree. I went after a business degree
Okay.
because I thought, okay, because I mean, I remember having those conversations early on, right? You're a safety professional and you're thinking altruism is only going to get you so far,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It might get your foot in the door, but man, when you get in that room, you better be able to talk their language. So tie it back to, I mean, revenue is always good to tie it back
Huge.
to, but that's not the most important thing, right? You want to, talk about efficiencies, talk about, because we're not a revenue generating department, right? We're a revenue spending department. We want to try to explain it, to the powers that be, how we're going to save time, how we're going to save money.
Yep.
If you have to tie it back to reduced workers' comp costs, reduced insurance costs, show that data, try to show, do your best to, but the biggest thing is understand how business operates, understand how your business operates, and be able to speak their language.
That's huge, especially today. I've noticed Verdansk just did a report, and they say I think this is the average number of stakeholders in a given technology purchase now, or physical purchase has like tripled in the last 20 years. We got procurement, we got IT, we got we got security, we have all these new people, and so the bad thing is you can talk really good to one guy, but that guy's language is not necessarily like IT's not talking finance's language, and so that same pitch might fall on deaf ears if you don't have the ability to wear a lot of different hats. Thank God safety people tend to be good at doing that. I
We're
think like
multilingual.
you're multilingual for sure, because you have to be, which is great. I love safety. One thing I want to dive into you is I find a lot of safety guys, and it's not necessarily a career you have to stay in forever, but my goodness, if you play it right, it seems to give exposure to so many levels of the organization. You're working with ops, you're working with quality, you can work up and down the organization, you can work on the plant floor with the people, but you can also get exposure to some of the leadership. So has that affected your career, your growth, your thoughts around safety at all as a career choice and kind of your world?
The
Not so much.
exposure? No, not really. I mean, once I decided that safety and or
Worth
EHS
it.
was going to be my career choice, I mean, there's been other opportunities to go more business production, some opportunities to maybe break into like a VP level role. I kind of like that director level right now where I'm at and my, given my experience and my educational background, maybe later on it's something I'll grow into. I think once people kind of decide, hey, the EHS is where I want to live, uh,
Right.
you know, I think we tend to stay.
That's huge. Oh, that's a good piece too. Yeah. What is it about safety that keeps you hooked? Because like you said, you could take some of these other career tracks now. You have some potential opportunity or have had. What is it about safety that keeps bringing you back?
I mean, for me, it's, every time someone comes up and says, "Hey, I really, this program worked, right?" Or "I'm glad we did that because, the other day I was using that machine and something popped out and the guard was there." It's the people, right? It's just knowing that I'm a part, you know, a lot of the time it can be thankless, but it's
Yeah.
just those, every safety professional probably has at least they can count on one hand. I'm willing to bet how many times somebody come up and, thank them.
Yeah. That's
And for
amazing.
me, that's huge.
Right. Well, and the thing is I love about safety too, and I talked to, everyone's a little different, but there are numbers that we're doing on these 301 logs every year or what have you, and, hand smash or whatever. And I mean, like I was asking earlier, I had a guy, he was a big guitarist, just a hobbyist, but he had a big incident and probably will never play the guitar again. And it was a very preventable situation. And so, you can make more units and you can make the company more money. And, like a lot of the guys in quality or production or whatever are doing. But I think there is something that's pretty cool about the tangible outcomes of the safety profession, what you do every day. That's kind of above and beyond what a lot of other people really can say, from an impact level that they're making on the organization. So, yeah, because I mean, it just takes one time for these guys to have one thing go wrong and it can, kind of change their whole life
Right.
negatively forever. And I've seen it so many times. It's why I had no idea until I got in the safety world. Like, the world is safer. And I'd love to get your take on this too. Is another question I'll kind of segue into. We're seeing the TRIR, which I'm not the huge fan of that being the end all be all metric, but we're seeing those trend down, but we've really stagnated since the early thousands on SIFs, major SIFs, in terms of reduction year over year. In your business, maybe it's safe, maybe that's not a problem, but do you have any thoughts on that as a whole? Is it just something that is part of doing business? What are your thoughts on maybe technology helping us improve, why we're stuck, your insights from your industry? I would love to hear.
Sure. You know, I in this current role that I'm in, we tend to focus on more leading indicators than lagging
Yes.
indicators, right? I mean, yes, we still have to report out those lagging indicators to OSHA on our OSHA reporting. We still keep a couple of lagging indicators like total recordables and DART rates and things. I mean, you want to keep an eye on them. They're
You do.
there. We track them. We want to know. But what we are really focusing on is a preventative, proactive safety culture. We require even our C levels when they're going out to a site. We've got 12 sites, globally. When they go out to a site to do their role, they're required to do a safety walk on that site.
Wow.
You
All
know,
right.
it's coming from the top down. We're living it, and putting in those safety observations has been huge for us. We have caught so many things before they become a problem.
Yep.
We have some behavior-based safety things. I think that was a big buzzword in safety for a long time. I still think it kinda is.
Yeah.
And I think it's got its merits. I just don't think it's gonna be the foundational platform. I just don't think safeties will ever have a foundational platform. I think there's just different ways to do it. And for us and what we do in our business, being out there every day doing safety observational walks, catching things, getting everyone at every level involved,
Yes.
that's what's working for us.
That's awesome. Is there a carrot and a stick in your organization or anything that you've seen trending, working in terms of like positive and negative reinforcement around safety to kind of develop that culture at any level of the org? I know that's a hard
Yeah.
question.
Well, it's not, I mean, the carrot obviously is when, you're catching things beforehand, you're making those corrective actions, everyone's kind of towing the rope and I mean that's always the
Do you
carrot, right?
evangelize that at all? Like, do you think the front line knows that things were prevent? Is there a way for you? Like, is that communicated? Do you think?
I think so. I think at least in what we're doing, I think so because they're the ones, a lot of our frontline are involved in the safety observational walks, right? This isn't just coming from
That's
management,
huge.
right? We require everyone to do these walks. Again, it goes back to building up those relationships with the frontline. And if they're involved in it, right?
Yes.
They take a little bit of ownership of it, right? And I think that makes them feel like, hey, I'm a part of this, right?
Yeah.
The stick, again, it goes back to that behavior, right? You still have lots of folks that are veteran employees, hey, I've been doing it this way for 30 years, stuff like that. You're going to have that uphill battle a little bit. I think that can be a little bit of a stick. It's hard to change people that change their way of thinking.
Right.
And then you asked earlier about technology, right? I think, when it comes to things helping us out and sort of building an overall preventative safety culture, we've seen like these camera systems with like the AI built into them and stuff,
Yeah.
right? I've seen some pretty impressive ones. We haven't implemented anything recent, but I've seen some pretty impressive ones. And I think I find myself kind of gravitating to that.
Yeah.
AI has been a huge, right, any EHS professional will tell you.
Huge.
In the last 2 to 3 years, AI has been a massive help.
Yep.
So I think, as we move forward, technology is always going to be a friend to the EHS industry,
Right.
but don't just go out there and kind of blanket coverage things. Really, really try to understand what its capabilities are and does it fit the problem you're trying to solve?
Right. Yeah, don't just buy it for the sake of buying. It's funny you mentioned AI because I've actually dabbled a little bit in some of those arenas myself. Did you think in future state, right, as a safety professional, just, nerding out. Do you think that's going to be mainstream? Do you think I mean, a common term I think they use is computer vision. I see it a lot in quality. I see it a lot in production because it's a pretty simple plug and play. Like they can just measure the number of units coming off the line and it's cheaper to do the camera, or maybe it's integrated into the hardware of the machine. But from a safety perspective, do you see that being a leading indicator tool or at least being adopted maybe as much as safety software, EHS software has been? Is that kind of the next frontier in your mind?
In my mind, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think it's gonna be huge.
Awesome. That's awesome. And you've seen a little bit of it too. So it is bleeding edge, people, I will say, because I've 2 companies I've done, and I went on a couple shops that are piloting it, and it's definitely like anything, especially anything in AI, it does seem to get these crazy incremental improvements. Where it's at today is probably not where it's gonna be, and where it's at today may or may not fit the bill, but I would agree with you. I think, give it a couple years of cooking, or maybe not even that long, and it might be able to do some magic, in the right scenarios for sure.
Really.
No, that's good to know. So, and then I guess, rounding this out a little bit, the state of the industry, and you're in the manufacturing world, which is a unique microcosm in and of itself. Is there anything you think safety world it's broken today? Anything that you don't love, just from a macro lens of the safety world, the safety culture, what you're required to report on compliance standards, anything in that world that you would change if you could?
Well,
I was gonna say a couple things are
it's
floating in there.
only an hour long, podcast,
Yeah, yeah.
Zach. So I would say for me, think as we develop, as these companies, right? As these companies, I mean, I've worked for lots of different organizations, and I think executives, managers, directors, I think we're all getting better at safety. I think we're all evolving.
Mm,
It feels like, and that could be a number of reasons, right? That could be, the largest generation is starting to retire, and we're getting like this younger generation in these leadership roles, and they understand it from a different perspective, and we're getting more buy-in. We're getting all these things. For me, it feels like the authorities having jurisdiction aren't
mm,
keeping up with the evolution, right? It feels like we're evolving, but they're not. And so that compliance piece has become such a sandpaper item. It's just
mm,
rubbing on you, leaving you raw. And I don't, I feel like that's probably the biggest piece. I think these authorities, whether it's North America, HSE in the UK, Ministries of Labor, in other countries, I just think they need to get caught up.
yeah. That doesn't surprise me at all. I can see that. I mean, government tends to move glacially slow, and the world today with technology definitely seems to be picking up gear, and safety is obviously going to be downstream and affected by that. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Is there anything that you think gets in the way from a non-regulatory standpoint of safety leaders actually driving change? Like if there was one thing that you're like, hey, you should watch out for, this is a red flag, or maybe you're coming into a new org, this would be a red flag for you as a kind of a safety leader.
I mean, we've kind of talked about it a little bit already. I mean, I think red flags for me, I think, whenever I'm interviewing with a company or anything like that, I always go to the authority, like OSHA, for instance, right?
Right.
And I'll look up
Look at,
reports.
yeah, yeah.
I want to see you know, I want to see what kind of injuries they've had, any recordables, things like that, investigations. I also, when I'm interviewing, I ask about capital improvement projects. What's the revenue
Okay.
like? Does EHS have a budget? One of the red flags for me is when they tell me, well, EHS budget is kind of integrated in with the operations budget, right? I
Right.
think, okay, so that means EHS has no money, right?
Yep.
We don't even have a leg to stand on. So those are red flags for me, right? I think every organization should have a separate safety budget. It should not be integrated. And if you're going to be an organization that builds out like strategy, like strat plans, right? Most larger organizations will build out strat plans, 5-year plans, 10-year plans.
Yep.
Safety should have its own section.
I like that.
It
I
should be
wonder how
talked
common
about.
that actually is. That's a good tip. I haven't heard anyone bring that up specifically, but that's an interesting thought. Yeah, I mean they'll have their risk mitigation section. A lot of times they'll have some sort of risk component to that. So there's no reason safety wouldn't have a page or two in there for sure. Awesome. Well, we're closing out. Couple things, just rapid fire at the end. Is there a book or something that you would recommend for people that has shaped, and it doesn't even have to necessarily be relevant to safety, just
Yeah,
some,
it's not.
yeah,
I do
okay,
have a
okay,
book
good, you got
actually.
one, perfect, yeah, let's go. Books are easy,
um,
Rex, for people, so it's
Yeah,
great.
so I tell you, I read this book a while back, and I think to be a successful EHS person, you really have to know yourself.
Okay,
And this book has nothing to do with safety. The title of it's called The Untethered Soul,
okay.
and it's by Michael Singer.
I haven't heard of this one. I'm gonna put this on my reading list.
Okay, you should. It's an amazing book. I actually have a copy. I actually ended up buying it. I read it, and then I ended up buying a copy. It's on my phone right now, and even from time to time, I will pull it up and read little chapters from it. It's really about understanding yourself because as an EHS person out there, and you're talking, one day you're in the boardroom, the next day you're out on the factory floor, right?
Mhm.
You know, depending on your role in the organization, manager, director, coordinator, whatever, that's the expectation. And you're talking to so many different personalities and you're talking business processes, you're talking machine guarding, you're talking all these different subject matters, right? People, I think, have an expectation of EHS professionals that whenever you ask a question, they're going to immediately have the answer right then and there. Almost like they treat us like we're AI.
Right. Right.
I think that's why we gravitated to it. So I think this book really helped me understand that you know, you know things about myself. It's okay not to have the answer right away. I can go back and research it and get them the information they're looking for. It's really talks about just kind of dealing with the inner turmoil
Yeah.
of of yourself while trying to be successful in your life.
Oh, that's good. I love this because I get really amazing book recommendations that have typically nothing to do with safety, but I can see the application on many levels. So it's always a good read and widely applicable to different areas of life. Well, one thing that I would love is there anywhere somebody you have a following? Do you have a group? Do you have anything that you would like as us kind of giving back to you and thanking you for your time? Any initiatives, any events, or any groups or committees or anything you're a part of that you would like to share with people that they could potentially join or follow you on?
Unfortunately, I don't really have that many.
That's
I
awesome.
follow the safety nights.
Yeah, yeah.
I like those and I like that group. And then, but, outside of that, I really, a lot of my time is spent between work and my own family.
Yeah, yeah, as it should be, as it should be. That's good. Well, you're not social famous yet, but, Benjamin
Not
Gratto,
yet.
we got a peek behind the curtain today. We really, really appreciate the time. I think we got some great nuggets here. We'll synthesize all this and get this out to the whole Safety Nights group. Thank you guys for tuning in, and, we'll see you next week for another one.
All
All
right.
right.
Thank you so much.